If someone had recorded what happened in that private room, no one would believe I walked back into it again 2 days later. I had been working the spa for less than a month, still learning and trying to look confident in front of clients. I needed the job, so I ignored the uneasy feeling that followed me down the hallway the day I was assigned to the owner's son. The receptionist avoided eye contact when she handed me the key card for the private room, which already made me feel exposed before I even stepped inside. I had seen him once in the lobby, speaking over everyone and laughing too loudly, and I knew exactly who he was because the staff changed their tone around him. I told myself that he was just another spoiled client and that my job was simple. Just follow the routine and leave. He was lying face down on the table when I entered, shirt off. I felt very disgusted when I got closer. His skin was extremely oily, in a way that is difficult to explain without making me feel sick. The smell in the room was heavy and sour, but I had to focus on keeping my expression neutral so I would not offend him. When I placed my hands on his back, my palms slid too easily, leaving a cloudy film that stuck under my nails. His skin was full of enlarged pores, some dark and clogged, and when I pressed down with more pressure, thin streaks of oil surfaced again as if his body was producing it nonstop. He started making low, exaggerated sounds of pleasure every time I moved my hands, and the noises were not subtle or embarrassed. They were deliberate and loud enough to fill the entire room. Harder. Do not stop there. Press lower. I kept working because I did not want to create a problem. But the longer it went on, the more obvious it became that he was enjoying my discomfort as much as the massage. As the session continued, he began moving his hips slowly against the table, making it impossible to ignore what he was turning the situation into. I tried to redirect the massage toward his shoulders and neck, but he corrected me immediately and ordered me back to his lower back in a tone that did not sound like a suggestion. I stepped away once to wash my hands because they were coated again in grease, and while I stood at the sink, I heard him laughing softly behind me. You do not like getting dirty. You will get used to it. I realized he was testing how far he could push without consequences. When I returned to the table and finally told him the session was over, he rolled onto his back and stared at me in a way that made my skin crawl. His chest and stomach were just as greasy, and the pores were even more visible up close, which made it hard to keep my voice steady. He sat up slowly and said that now it was his turn to give me a massage, as if that were a normal extension of the service. I explained that it was not allowed and that I needed to prepare the room, but he did not accept that answer. I am not asking you. Lock the door properly. When he reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife, small but sharp, the situation shifted from uncomfortable to dangerous in a way that left no room for negotiation. He told me to lock the door, and I did it because I knew no one outside would hear anything over the music. He pressed the blade against my side and ordered me onto the table, reminding me that I worked for his family and that causing trouble would only hurt me. I tried to reason with him, but the knife moved to the back of my neck, and I understood that arguing would only make him more aggressive. I lay face down feeling exposed and powerless, and when he told me to remove my top, I obeyed because I was thinking only about surviving that moment. There was a pause that stretched too long, and then I felt something warm hit my back. He had spit on me, and he spread it slowly with his hands as if it were part of a routine he had practiced before. Do not move. I like when you are quiet. His breathing grew heavy as he leaned closer, and when he shifted toward my face, I knew he was about to spit again, this time directly at me. That thought broke whatever restraint I had left, and I reached blindly for the lamp on the small table beside me. He was so focused on looming over me that he did not notice my arm moving, mixing with the grease and dripping onto the sheets. He screamed in shock and pain, dropping the knife as he stumbled backward, slipping slightly on the oily floor. I rolled off the table, grabbed my shirt without fully putting it on, and rushed to unlock the door while he shouted loudly, "She attacked me! Call the police!" His voice carried down the hallway, and I knew that whatever happened next would not be simple. I almost collided with his father in the hallway, and I tried to explain everything at once, including the knife and the forced contact, but my words came out fast and uneven. Before the owner responded, his son stepped out behind me, holding his bleeding forehead and pointing at me like I had assaulted him without reason. "She is unstable. She hit me for no reason." The owner's expression changed quickly, and instead of checking on me, he focused entirely on his son, ordering towels and telling staff to step back. He then grabbed my arm and pulled me into his office, closing the door with controlled anger. Inside, he spoke in a low voice that was more threatening than shouting, asking if I understood how serious my actions were and how easily this could ruin my career. I repeated what had happened, including the knife and the spit, but he did not react with surprise, which told me that this was not new information for him. He opened a drawer and placed an envelope full of money on the desk, explaining that if the police were called, the security cameras would show only me hitting his son. "My son has needs. You should have handled this better." He then made the arrangement clear, saying that I would continue working and that I would attend his son twice a week in the private room with no complaints and no drama. If I refused, I would be fired and they would make sure no other spa hired me. I looked at the envelope and thought about rent and bills, and I understood that I was trapped in a system designed to protect them, not me. 2 days later, I stood again in front of that same door, fully aware that this time he did not even need a knife because the threat was already established. I opened the door and saw him waiting, a fresh bandage on his forehead and the same greasy shine covering his body. He smiled in a way that showed satisfaction rather than anger. "Be careful with lamps this time. We both know how this works now." I performed the massage in silence, keeping my movements controlled and mechanical, while he continued to comment on my reactions as if it amused him. He did not threaten me openly again, because he did not need to, and that made the situation feel more permanent and more suffocating. When the session ended, he leaned close and reminded me that he would see me again in a few days, and I left the room knowing that I had not escaped anything. Twice a week, I entered that room knowing exactly what would happen, and I focused on counting minutes and avoiding anything that would trigger another escalation. He acted confident and relaxed as if the arrangement proved his control, and I followed the routine because I believed that losing my job would leave me with nothing. Each session reinforced the imbalance, and the spa continued operating normally, welcoming clients with smiles and soft music while hiding what happened behind one closed door. I understood that the owner would always choose his son over any employee, and that any complaint would turn into a story where I was the unstable one. I am still working there while I search for another job, sending applications and hoping someone calls before I lose the ability to endure this routine. I now understand why so many women disappeared from the staff list without explanation. Until I find a way out, I keep showing up sliding the key card, hearing the lock click, and stepping into that room where everything is clean on the surface and rotten underneath. The last time I saw my ex before the restraining order, she was standing across the street from my apartment staring at my windows as if she still lived there. The last time I saw her after that, I was trapped inside a tanning bed while she raised the temperature and listened to me scream. 6 months ago, I filed a restraining order against Mara because her obsession stopped being emotional and started feeling strategic. She tracked my schedule, showed up at places I never told her about, and sent messages describing what I wore during the day. She never shouted or begged in public, which made it worse because she acted calm while proving she could reach me anytime. When the court approved the order, she disappeared without protest. No calls, no emails, no sudden appearances. That silence made it easier to believe she had moved on, and after a few months, I stopped checking over my shoulder every time I stepped outside. A new spa opened near my apartment, and I booked a tanning session to deal with stress. I did not check who worked there, and I did not imagine that she would be employed in the control room, monitoring machines that could turn heat into a weapon. The spa looked clean and professional, and nothing about the reception area suggested risk. I signed in, paid for a 15-minute tanning session, and followed the hallway to a private room where the bed was already warmed up. The staff member who prepared it did not introduce herself, and I did not pay attention to the name tag. I lay inside the tanning bed, pulled the lid down, and pressed start. The digital timer began counting down from 15 minutes, and the warmth felt normal at first. The fans hummed quietly, and I tried to relax. Somewhere behind a tinted glass window, Mara saw my name on the schedule and leaned forward to confirm it was me. She had access to the system that controlled temperature, ventilation, and timer overrides. And she understood exactly how far she could push things before triggering automatic shutdown. Inside the bed, I had no idea she was watching. The first minute felt routine, and I kept my eyes closed behind the protective goggles while the heat spread evenly across my skin. Then I noticed the hum deepened slightly, and the warmth increased in a way that did not feel programmed. I opened my eyes and reached for the emergency stop button to test it. The button clicked, but the lights stayed on. I pressed it again, holding it down longer this time, yet nothing changed. The heat continued to rise in steady increments, and I pushed against the lid with both hands, expecting it to lift easily. It did not move at all, and the hinge felt locked from outside. I shouted toward the door, explaining clearly that the machine was malfunctioning and that I needed assistance. My voice echoed back at me, and the enclosed space amplified the sound of my breathing as the air grew hotter. The temperature crossed from uncomfortable to painful, and my back began to burn where it touched the surface. In the control room, Mara adjusted the settings manually, overriding the safety limits. She watched me on the monitor as I tried to sit up and failed to create space between my body and the heated surface. The heat increased again, and my chest tightened from the lack of ventilation. I tried to slow my breathing, but the air inside felt trapped and heavy. I pounded the lid with my fist and shouted louder, making sure anyone outside could hear the panic in my voice. Footsteps approached the hallway outside my room, and I yelled that I was being burnt and that the machine would not shut off. A man's voice asked if everything was okay, and I felt relief because someone had noticed the urgency in my tone. Before he could open the door, another voice answered him in a controlled, steady manner that I recognized instantly. Mara told him that I had requested a higher intensity session and that strong reactions were normal. Her voice was calm, almost clinical, and she did not raise it. I shouted her name so the man would understand this was personal and not technical. The temperature inside the bed surged again, and the pain across my arms and face sharpened into something constant and aggressive. I tried to turn onto my side, but the lid pressed down firmly, limiting movement. The man outside hesitated, and I could hear doubt in his breathing as he stood near the door. I kept speaking clearly and loudly, explaining that the emergency stop was not working and that I could not open the lid. The heat intensified further, and my skin felt tight and swollen. Mara's tone changed slightly as she insisted that interference could cause injury, which was meant to intimidate him into backing off. Inside the bed, I felt lightheaded from the heat and forced myself to keep talking so that I would not lose consciousness. The man knocked on the door harder and demanded that it be opened immediately. Mara responded more sharply now, accusing him of overreacting and interfering with staff procedures. The tension in their voices rose, and I understood that he was deciding whether to trust her explanation. Inside, the temperature reached a level that made it difficult to think clearly. My skin burned across my back, shoulders, and face, and I could smell heated plastic mixed with something metallic. I tried again to push the lid upward with both arms, but it did not shift even slightly. The man stopped arguing and slammed his shoulder against the door. The first impact shook the frame but did not break it. Mara raised her voice and told him to step away, but he hit the door again, harder this time. On the third impact, the door cracked and burst open. He rushed inside and saw the machine glowing at a level that was clearly unsafe. He shouted that it needed to be turned off immediately, and I heard movement near the control panel as objects fell to the floor. The bed continued humming at full intensity while they struggled near the controls. He pulled the main power cord from the wall, causing sparks to flash near the outlet. The lights flickered violently before shutting down, and the lid released with a mechanical click. When I touched my face, the skin felt swollen and uneven under my fingers. My arms were red and blistered, and the man who had opened the bed stepped back in shock when he saw the damage. He immediately called for help while keeping his body between me and Mara. She stood there near the control panel, breathing faster now, and insisted that she was trying to prove that we were still connected. Her explanation sounded desperate and unstable, and it became clear to everyone in the room that this was not an accident. Paramedics arrived quickly and began treating the burns while asking how long I had been inside. They covered my body with sterile sheets and administered medication for pain, which dulled the edges but did not erase the damage. Mara was restrained and removed from the room, still trying to justify what she had done. I survived, but the burns changed my face permanently. I underwent multiple procedures to repair the damage, and even after surgery, the scars remained visible. Mirrors are no longer neutral objects in my life. The spa closed after investigators confirmed that the safety systems had been manually overridden. Mara now faces charges that include attempted homicide and violation of a restraining order. The legal process is ongoing, and I have to describe the incident repeatedly in court. I was trapped inside a machine and depended entirely on a stranger who chose not to ignore my screams. If he had walked away, the outcome would have been different. What happened in that room was controlled and deliberate. I walked into that spa expecting a routine session, and I left with scars that will never fully fade. I've never been a fan of spending money on those fancy massage chains. Aside from the fact that they were expensive, I always got the impression that I was paying more for the decor of the place than for the service itself. So when I was recommended to an older woman in the neighborhood who offered reasonably priced massages in her home, I thought it might be a good idea. It helped a local person, avoid being overpriced, and frankly, the possibility of a more personalized treatment appealed to me. Her house was nothing out of the ordinary. A small, modest structure on a quiet street. There was something comforting about that. About the idea that I wasn't walking into a spa with neon lights and scents that seemed designed to hide something. When I rang the doorbell, I was greeted by a gray-haired lady. She looked in her mid-60s, and her attitude was that of a sympathetic mother. She invited me in with a friendly gesture and led me to a room at the back of the house which functioned as her small study. The space was cozy, with dim lighting and a massage bed in the center. The atmosphere was simple and unpretentious, exactly what I was looking for. She asked me to take off my shirt and lie face down. "I'm going to make you feel like new again." I lay back on the bed, feeling the softness of the mattress under my chest. She began to work with her hands. They were small but firm, and she knew what she was doing. I closed my eyes, letting my muscles relax, enjoying the relief. After a few minutes of massaging, just as I felt myself sinking into that state of deep relaxation, the woman excused herself. "I have to take a call. I'll be quick." I found it odd that she told me about a call and I didn't hear anything, but perhaps she had an appointment or was expecting something important. I remained still, waiting for her to return. As I waited, trying to keep myself in that state of calm, several minutes passed and I began to feel uneasy, but not enough to worry. Maybe she had been delayed or the call had been complicated. These were things that one might have to wait to pay a little less. Finally, I heard the door to the room open again, but something made me tense up immediately. The approaching footsteps were heavy, very different from those of the woman. I felt a twinge of unease in my back, but I continued to lie still, waiting for the massage to begin again. When I felt the hands on my skin, I noticed something very different. The hands were large, rough, and with unusual strength. I panicked and tried to get up. It was then that the pressure on my back began to increase. It increased so much that I couldn't move. The person was squeezing me. "Ooh, I love your skin. It's perfect. Don't worry, I'm my mother's son. I do it as well as she does." A shiver ran through my body. I was about to turn around when those huge hands pressed me against the bed, crushing my body with brutal force. The lady never mentioned her son. I hadn't seen anyone else in the house when I arrived, yet there he was, squeezing me with terrifying force. "I apologize in behalf of my mother. She sometimes forgets to tell the clients that she is training me as a massager. You know, it's always been a dream to do this, to touch the skin, to move it back and forth, to squeeze it. Please, let me go. I don't want any more massages. I'll pay you. I'll give you everything I have. Oh, you make it sound like I'm doing something bad. You better relax and enjoy. This is not about the money. The man's nails began to dig into my skin, tearing it apart bit by bit as if he wanted to rip me to pieces. His breathing was ragged and heavy. He was as nervous as I was, but his nerves were coming from somewhere else. He was anxious. The pain in my back became unbearable. Every time I tried to move, his fingers dug deeper into my skin, and I could feel his fascination with my body turning into a kind of obsession. With a desperate effort, I stretched my arm toward my pants, searching for anything I could use to defend myself. My fingers found my car key in the front pocket. I pulled it out with difficulty, my hands trembling with fear and adrenaline. I knew I had only one chance. With all my strength, I turned my body just enough to drive the key into his leg. The man screamed in pain. The pressure on my back eased up enough for me to roll over and stand up. My skin burned, and the pain in my back was still latent, but I was free, at least for the moment. The man staggered, clutching his injured leg. Ooh, yes, I love it. You left me scarred. It hurts so much. You are sick. On the other side of the door, I heard the lady's voice. Are you done with him, honey? Are you satisfied? I couldn't believe it. The man was telling the truth. This had all been planned. It wasn't an accident or a coincidence. She knew what her son was doing, and she had no intention of stopping him. Hurt me. Give me more. At that moment, the door swiftly opened. The lady walked in. Her face was tense, but not with surprise, but with anger. She looked at me and then saw her son, wounded and withering in pain and happiness. What did you do to my son? The situation became completely uncontrollable. Not only was I trapped, but now they were both after me. In pure panic, I grabbed the massage bed and threw it at the two of them. The woman fell to the floor, shocked, and her son backed up a step, still reeling from the pain. I didn't waste a second. I ran down the hallway, desperate to find a way out. I ran down the small hallway of the house, listening to the woman's screams and her son's heavy footsteps behind me. Panic clouded my thoughts, but I knew that if I stopped, I would be finished. I reached the living room, where the front door was only a few feet away. I turned the door handle hard, but it was locked. I looked around for a key, something, anything that might help me get out. Finally, I saw a window. Without thinking, I threw a chair against the glass, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. I crawled through the broken frame, feeling the glass cutting into my arms and legs, but I didn't care. I was out. I was alive. I don't know how long I ran. The streets were empty and the night was deep. I made it to my car, shaking and bleeding, but I didn't stop until I was far, far away from that house. I never passed near that street again. A few hours later, I filed a formal report at the police station. I was too afraid to do it, but I knew I had to do it before someone else was taken care of by that family of psychopaths. After my report, many people said that what I was saying was a lie, that they had never experienced anything like that. But other people couldn't talk. The police knew that several people were missing in that area, and when they linked that family to the disappeared, there was no turning back. The man was convicted of disappearing at least 4 people, and the mother was the accomplice. I may have had the worst afternoon of my life, but these people were never going to disappear people again.